Hello and welcome to the About to Interview podcast. I'm your host, that guy named John. This is a supplemental version of the About to Review podcast, which drops every Wednesday and covers movies, TV shows, film festivals, and more. You can follow the podcast on all forms of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at About to Review, and make sure to subscribe on iTunes/Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Blueberry, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. This show focuses solely on the conversations that I have with authors, directors, actors, and creators, and is available on YouTube as well as subscribing to the podcast. Make sure to click the subscribe button below, give a thumbs up, and check out the full show notes with links to the guests at abouttoreview.com.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Yeah! Let's all go to the lobby. Yeah! Let's all go to the lobby. Yeah! Let's all go to the lobby. Yeah! Let's all go to the lobby.
Finally joining the podcast after trying to chase you down for months on Twitter, which happens, which oddly enough, even though we used to hang out at the same comic book shop in Eugene, welcome to the show, Mike and Laura Allred.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you.
That might be all you hear of Laura, because
No,
she apparently was
she'll chime
hesitant.
Mike does all the talking.
No, you watch.
So, Mike Allred, of course, is incredibly well known from your original stuff like Madman and the Atomics, all the way to X-Statix, X-Force, to the recent things like Bug and Forager, and that partnership with your brother Lee. So now at Emerald City Comic Con, we just got done hearing you speak on a panel about the legendary Jack Kirby.
That was a blast.
That was actually a really fun panel.
That panel was incredible. So it had Chris Claremont, Jaime Hernandez, Adria Gilroy, and
Joe
Joe Keating. So what about this con in particular, Emerald City Comic Con, makes it special?
Well, first of all, we love Seattle.
Yeah, it's kind of close to home.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the division of space is really useful.
Yeah?
If you want
Except
to
I
see
keep getting lost.
Yeah, it is. It's like a multi-level chess.
Yeah, but I had to go like a back alley to get up to some escalators to get up
But
to...
if you want to see your favorite artists, the artists are all grouped in one specific area, which is pretty great.
Yeah, and it feels more open, and you're not crammed in a small space.
Yeah.
Right.
And we were here just 3 or 4 years ago, not sure, but exactly when, but about 3 or 4 years ago, and I think it's at least doubled since then.
Oh, for sure.
And then we were there a few years before that, and it seemed like it was bigger than before that. It was like tiny.
Yeah.
It went from like one room to like now it's everywhere.
And now we can ask ourselves, did we like it when it was small and intimate, or now that it's crazy?
Right. Well, and that is always kind of the weird balance, is you want it to still be intimate, and you want it to still feel, that group, that togetherness, but at the same time, everything has to grow and change.
I think I prefer the growth in that,
Yeah?
because it's an accumulative energy, and you just kind of get caught up in it, and the enthusiasm. I mean, we had a nonstop line all day, and
Bragger.
Humbly,
I'm so popular. The line is just wrapped around the building.
let me just tell you how popular I am.
Right.
No, my point is that.
I like how she just
You
completely
guys!
threw you under the bus.
You guys!
Before we started recording, Laura's
so-
like, I'm not going to say anything.
I told you she would contradict me and humiliate me and undercut me.
Mike is so humble.
My point is,
Okay, sorry.
because there's that consolidation of artists up there, and you can find it was really easy for people to find us.
Yeah.
And because we don't do that many shows, it's like a really, for instance, if we did do a lot of shows, there wouldn't have been this energy of people coming in, knowing that here was this time that these people that specifically wanted to see us had the exact time and place to do that. And so there's an appreciation there. Us for them, and them
definitely.
for us.
We totally
and
have an appreciation.
We just had this great exchange all day long, as opposed to just kind of, twiddling your thumbs or something.
For sure. Quick Comic-Con story.
But I am popular.
So, I mean, well, of course. Everybody knows that.
Everybody knows
So,
that.
if we were to get back in the Wayback Machine.
When I wasn't popular.
2000.
You're always popular with
you have
me.
been popular for a long time, but it was
Thank
like
you, Laura.
2003. Eugene Comic-Con.
Salad days.
I was there working, just doing some volunteer work with.
Was that year Mike Mignola and Art Adams came down? Remember that?
I think that
one
was
show
no,
they
that
came
was
down?
that was a different one.
Oh.
You bragger. We're going to talk about how Art Adams
we
and
know
Mike
everybody.
Mignola stayed at our house.
They're our really
Oh,
good
wow.
They're really good friends.
really good friends.
Because we're popular. Tell them about when Robert Rodriguez and Martin Scorsese stayed.
Oh,
at
I
our
was
house.
waiting for that. No, I have a specific
You're
question
so
about that
crap.
that we'll get to
Robert
later.
did.
But with this little Comic-Con in Eugene, Oregon, we were in one room. There was just a large rectangle of tables where
Yeah.
everybody was. It
was like the building's kind of round, right?
Yeah, it was a round building, and we were just
That's a weird room.
in a rectangle of tables.
Yeah.
That was the year that you signed my DVD copy of G-Men from Hell.
Okay.
That also had the hidden feature of Astro-esque
Oh, yeah.
on it. So in the years that we have had since then, and all the talk of reboots of all of these things, so when is Astro-esque 2 coming out?
yeah,
right.
never.
First of all, the cut that ended up on the DVD
Mm-hmm.
was the wrong one. It wasn't letterboxed, and the sound was screwy. It had all of
It
the
was a bit
dialogue
weird.
in one speaker and everything else on the other. It was a mess. Oh my gosh, we're looking at Chewbacca right now. That's incredible.
Ooh,
And I can
awesome.
hear his
He's about to
stilts.
go to the escalator. Okay, we're
Whoop.
gonna pause while we watch
Oh, this
this.
is
He did
Oh,
it.
wow.
That.
Damn, that's a
Yay!
good costume.
But as he was walking,
That
I
was
could
cool.
hear his stilts creaking, and so I was like, "Ooh, this could
That
get
was
interesting."
incredible.
Wow, he's-
Let us paint a picture for you people.
Impressive.
Right.
Chewbacca is very popular.
Yeah.
So with Astro-esque, that was your kind of first foray into filmmaking.
Yeah.
Now, my very specific question, because you mentioned Robert Rodriguez, confirm or deny that the reason Sin City the movie got made was because of you.
Confirmed.
So explain to the people, because this was something that those of us kind of in and around comics and the industry for a while, that was something that was going around, is that you kind of made those connections to make that happen.
Robert has said that many times. You'll see that and hear that and read it in interviews where
You connected him up with Bob, right?
Yeah.
Bob Schreck.
And so I was in an imprint group with Frank Miller and Mike Mignola and Art Adams and Jeff
All our
Darrow
friends.
and Dave.
Of course,
Thompson, all
yeah.
our very good friends. So he knew I knew Frank, but what I also knew was that the one person that I knew that Frank had enormous respect for is Bob Schreck, who's done incredible things for my career. And I knew that if Schreck could convince Frank that this was a good idea. By the way, I should say, Frank had the opportunity to make a Sin City movie before, and everybody had the red carpet laid out for him. He even wrote a screenplay, and I remember seeing it when I was with Mike Richardson, pitching Madman around Hollywood, and eventually got picked up by Universal, which is
Right.
where I met Robert Rodriguez.
Gotcha.
By the way. So anyway, just rounding this all up. But Frank, and this stuck with me ever since, and it's actually been one of my greatest driving forces. He was so in love with making comics. And this is when he was like just completely just swimming in the Sin City comics. That's where his passion was. So while he because one trap you can fall in the comic book industry is thinking that it's a stepping stone to television and film.
Right.
Instead of its own wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
And I was kind of thinking, well, so do I have to go around and pitch all this stuff to Hollywood to try to... Now, if you do get a movie made, then of course your comic book is going to be more well-known.
Right.
But do you kind of get lost? Does the comic book go away? And you see that happen a lot. A movie will get made, and then the comic book stops. And it's kind of frustrating. But what Frank said, and like we went on there was a Legend Tour. That was the name of our imprint group. And Frank would often be the keynote speaker, and then of course we'd have our own private time with him. And it was just kind of like Yoda. and it was always talking about the passion of the comic book art form itself. And as much as I loved it, he instilled this even deeper love and appreciation for it. And so, and now that's where I quickly came myself, was that the comic book is the theme. If anything else happens, like we've got the iZombie TV series, that's fun, that's great, that's awesome. But that series was a concluded thing. But if it wasn't, then if this was a continuing thing like Madman, then that's where my passion would be, to continue doing that. So it's always about where your passions are and deciding, do you want to be a filmmaker? Do you want to be a musician? Those were always the three prongs for me. Do I want to be a musician? Do I want to be a filmmaker?
With the gear, you know.
Or do I want to
still have
be
that
a
CD
comic book
also.
artist? Well, my main passion is comics, primarily because it's what it's the muscles I've exercised the most. It's what I can control the most. Everything's right in front of me. If I want to do something with the gear, then I got to call up everybody else and make that happen. If I want to make a movie, got to get a crew together, got to get a budget, etc. With the comic book, it's right there. And even if I just posted stuff online, bang, I can do that. So the control is really key, but the passion for the art form itself is there. So knowing that that's how Frank felt, when Robert was like, first of all, the conversation kind of went like this: hey, I'm wondering if you could hook me up with Frank Miller, because I have this great idea of how we could make a Sin City movie. So my first question was, well, does that mean we're going to put the Madman movie back again?
Right.
And he was like, well, yeah, but it's what we do with the Sin City movie is going to make the Madman movie that much better.
Okay.
And so it's like, okay, cool. And Robert always did far and above anything that I could never say any negative thing about him, because, first of all, I love him and I can't think of anything negative about him. But he's done so much for us that I would be the biggest jerk on the planet if I had anything bitter to say. And it was always fun to, to take part in his projects any way I could, and to kind of be a fly on the wall and all that. But that was fine. And so I did what I could, made some phone calls, and
that is amazing.
And Bob was the key. Shrek was the guy that was able to tell Frank, look, with Robert, you're going to have complete control. He will make the movie you want to see. And what Robert also did was he made a short film. It's Josh and Marla. It's that little scene with those actors.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Robert already had that in the can.
Wow.
He just, hey, you guys, I want to make this little thing. So knowing that he was going to be able to meet with Frank, he had that, had that super high contrast black and white photography. And so he knew, here's a guy who has his own facilities in Austin, Texas. Yeah. And we're going to collaborate. And what I want to do is get that panel on the screen, and that panel on the screen, and that panel on the screen. And Robert was able to convince him. But Bob was the guy that I knew was going to be able to convince Frank to hear Robert out.
That is incredible. And that was something that, again, Sin City stands alone by itself when in all of these comic book movies where you can take, and I've talked about this before, both personal life and on the podcast, I can put the comic book to the screen and turn pages. Yeah. And it is exactly mirrored on the screen.
I think the Sin City film is, to this day, the most faithful adaptation of a comic book to a film yet.
Yeah. I mean, especially visually, screenplay, because when you have a comic book, you already have the screenplay and the storyboard right there. It is how that translation happens in that creative process.
The casting is perfect. It's like he nailed everything. And Frank co-directed it. Like, he was there. And then they even got Quentin Tarantino to show up and do some directing. So it's the ultimate fan film. It's perfect.
Now, in thinking of and talking about creations and your original stuff versus kind of the things you do for the other companies. So with that creation, do you find it easier to do a project like your recent project with Bug, where you kind of went to them and you're like, hey, just like talked about on the panel, like, I kind of want to do some stuff with these characters that people have not really been doing much with.
Yeah.
That type of creative energy that you would put into an original piece where you can go anywhere you want. How is that process different for Bug, and did you feel that you still had that same control?
You really... there are so many examples. Well, Guardians of the Galaxy, for instance. it's once you've convinced the powers that be that they should put some support behind a more obscure character or group of characters.
Right.
That's the hurdle. Once you're past that hurdle, you're going to have way more freedom than if you're working with an established character like Spider-Man or Doctor Strange or what have you. And that's what we had with Bug. It was such an obscure character that the first argument is nobody knows who this is.
Right.
Well, if it's good, it'll have that little pop like other character. Like you can just name character after character that once they're given that little spotlight, then if the quality's there, it'll be celebrated.
Well, even things like Iron Man. When the first movie came out,
another great example.
Iron Man was a B character in the comics.
Yeah.
Tell that to somebody now who is not really in the industry back then.
You just proved my original point about a film will make a comic book character or a TV show. All of a sudden, this character nobody knows will know. Now, in the comic book industry, of course you know who Iron Man is, and you love Iron Man, and there's great classic Iron Man stories, and it's just one of a zillion characters Jack Kirby created or co-created, but the filmmakers, in this case Marvel Studios, really knew and believed in what they could do, and now they pretty much rule the world. But it all started from just, hey, who can we take and then make a successful film out of? And it was Iron Man. And so with relatively humble beginnings, smash hit, and then look what we've seen. It's like the Marvel Studios has just exploded with all these great, exciting projects. And because of that, I think that's why they were able to trust James Gunn, who wasn't a famous filmmaker.
Right.
So they could give this guy the right budget and this group of obscure characters and in my opinion, make the best Marvel movies yet. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy.
They're tremendous.
It just love that stuff. And the using the music as the actual music in the film as the soundtrack. I wanted to do that with Madman. He was going to run around with the transistor radio and some music. And I had I shouldn't even say this because I still hope someday to make a movie.
Speak it into existence.
Yeah. Well, with Robert, he just did so many wonderful things, but there was already so many passion projects he had. It became very clear to me that just out of kindness, he kept re-optioning the film, which we appreciated. But
for Madman,
So I eventually was like, we'll thank you, but I'll release you from this commitment. And so only now have I gotten, ever since it first got picked up by Universal Pictures in 1995, I think. Since then, only now have I gotten all the rights back.
So now it is completely back in your
it's all mine.
hands. You can do a film with it. You could do an animated. You could do kind of whatever
I can do anything I want with it. I completely own every aspect, all the rights. But as we were also talking, I'm so in love with what's in front of me on my drawing board. I'm not taking the time to run around and doing pitches and stuff.
Yeah.
So to answer the question I get asked the most about Madman, the only way a Madman TV show or movie is going to happen is if the right creators, the right power people come to me and say, here, we want to run with this and we share your vision. Let's make it happen. Other than that, I'm just in love with making comic books and am perfectly happy and satisfied doing that.
Excellent. Speaking of making comic books, one of the people that right after the panel that you made sure somebody came up to you, of course, being like, oh my gosh, I want to meet you, and you made sure to point out Laura. Be like, she is the colorist, all of that. So I definitely want to give Laura the spotlight for a minute because Mike's artwork is so incredibly iconic and it has so many of those Jack Kirby isms and those looks and the feels, but it would not be the same without your amazing color work.
I second that.
Well, actually, Mike is color deficient.
It's a fancy way of saying colorblind.
So
I am aware.
He likes more high contrast. So so that's like, I do that where he likes it.
So when you first get a panel or a page from Mike, what is the first thing that you look at where your eyes are drawn to the color palette and spectrum?
Yeah, Laura.
This is the About to Review podcast. We ask the tough
sometimes-
questions.
Yeah, sometimes I'll just like, jump right in and just do it all, and then every once in a while, Michael's saying, I thought, you might have done the background in like this color. So usually when I get a piece, I say, okay, do you have any suggestions
Gotcha.
before I jump in? But normally he just lets me do anything I want.
And just that might be confusing to people. I can see and appreciate colors.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time telling them apart.
Gotcha.
And so, for instance, if a certain value of green is next to a certain value of red, or a certain value of yellow is next to a certain value
They all look the same to him.
of orange
Yeah.
or green. Like there are some greens that look yellow to me. And
Right.
anyway, if it's pointed out to me, no, this color is this color, my brain will click and learn it.
Okay.
And
Then you have at least a comparison point in the future.
And so for the rest, in a comic book, for instance, that's green. My brain goes tick, and then I will always know when I look back at that what it is. But then I'll constantly have to relearn things that I'm seeing. But once I know what they are, I can learn what those colors are and know that's not purple, that's blue, that sort of thing. So, and I love Technicolor movies, for instance, and that's kind of what we want to see and that's how I see Laura's style. It's like a Technicolor comic book.
I like that. Now, talk a little bit about the collaboration. So is it something where when a new project comes along from the beginning, do you guys start to have those conversations of, and Mike is already smiling and laughing, so it is like, do you guys have those conversations of, okay, this is kind of how I want to play it out, or does somebody take the reins? I'm waiting to see kind of where this goes.
Well, I pretty much color everything Mike does. And he likes to be in control.
I like to surprise her.
Uh-huh.
Guess what you're going to color tomorrow?
Yeah.
Right.
Or he'll at night say it'll be like like almost midnight, and he goes, "Oh, I'm just finishing up this cover. Can you get it done tonight?"
By the way,
Yeah. By the way, and then Mike doesn't procrastinate. If he has something, he just like has to get it out of the way and just
laser
does it.
focus.
Yeah. So if he walks past my studio, if I'm sitting there watching TV or something, he'll just look at me and say, "Aren't you supposed to be working?"
not true.
But that's just the way he is. He has to just like
she's
work.
That's a guilty conscience.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking at her like, "Ooh, you're gorgeous. Oh,
Yeah.
I love you."
Oh, so
And
you
what she
telling me
sees, what
you-
she says
no,
is like,
you saying,
"Hey,
are
you
you
should."
shitting?
I was like, you might
You
be
should
thinking
be
that, but the
working.
words that come out of your mouth are
Yeah,
different.
the words coming out of your mouth are.
But to answer your original question,
Right.
when there is a new project, yeah, we talk it out. Like, I want it to feel like this. I want it to feel
Gotcha.
like that. Here are these characters if she's not familiar with them, and then she'll study them. She'll like just drink it in and absorb it, and then next time I see the progress, it's almost like 90%, like exactly.
Wow.
I mean, after all this time, she knows what I like, and every once in a while, I'll say something like, "This should be a little lighter. There's the mood needs to be a little lighter,
Or darker.
yeah, or darker." But it'll be that kind, like those
Usually-
kind of notes, and
Mike usually
but that
lets
rarely
me-
happens because she almost always does and
Usually-
better than what I'm hoping
No,
for.
Mike usually lets me do anything I want, so he rarely.
It's just a thrill when I see what she's done. It's like, I'm so
Well, that type
lucky.
of creative collaboration for decades now, I mean, is incredible. I mean, you talk about the Stan Lees and the Jack Kirby's, like those partnerships that then built so many
They
foundations.
didn't sleep together though, that we know of.
True. Who knows? There could be an expose in a couple decades.
New rumor for Stan and Jack.
Right. So the collaboration that you two have had for decades, the partnership that you guys have, is just incredible. So, final question. So for both of you, what is the most fun character to either draw and or color, and what is the most difficult character? And Laura first.
To color?
Yeah.
Well, I know.
Madman because he's white.
We could say the same thing about Silver Surfer.
So
you know?
easy, yeah. That would go.
Actually,
you go.
nothing-
So what is
Nothing's-
the most fun or most challenging?
What's challenging is when you get some of these characters that have like 50 million different things, and like it's different on the left side and the right side. But like Mike's stuff is usually never like that. So he like keeps things simple, which I like.
It doesn't get any simpler than Silver Surfer.
Yeah.
right?
Oh, he was amazing. I loved coloring him and Madman.
Because you like the character, not because he was simple to like just this all white character with the little shimmers on him. You didn't even have to do an exclamation
do
bolt
some work.
on his chest
Right.
like you do Madman.
Yeah.
Madman is my Silver Surfer. That's
Yeah.
why I designed him that way, because I love Silver Surfer so much.
Mm-hmm.
I just put him in boots and put this exclamation bolt on his chest. and
Madman's
he's good
super
to go.
fun. The atomics, but everything's been nothing's been that hard. Like for Mike drawing, like I know, like Captain America, and like Spider-Man have all those little webs.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a character that you really complained about, because it would just
No,
all this stuff.
No, what I have complained about is
Okay.
when we're going over a script and it'll be like 10,000 people standing over
Oh,
here,
boy.
and I'm like, okay, how many are you going to draw?
Right.
And I'm like, you're not drawing that many, right?
But I have to draw them all. You can just bathe them all in a blue light and
I
call
don't.
it a day.
Right.
I've done that. I've not
Like
done that.
the Sgt. Pepper Red Rocket 7 cover.
The Sgt. Pepper cover, she probably wasn't happy with me then, but I bet you had a blast doing that.
No, that was fun.
Because
Nice.
all the rockers on there are.
But any
Character
artist
she loves, too.
is gonna pretty much not like this is 1,000 person crowd
Right.
scene. You're gonna go okay.
Yeah, because
Okay.
you get paid the same per page.
Right.
If you draw one or
If
two
there's
or
one character or
10
1,000.
people. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, Mike, then, most fun to draw and most challenging. If there is a challenging one. I mean, Laura is just so good at everything she does. She's just not even challenged these days.
Oh,
so,
done.
I
I don't think so.
Actually, well, the most fun ultimately would be Madman.
Okay.
Just because there's just so much of me in there.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever he's on adventure, I can really relate.
Just drawing yourself all the time.
I get to decide what ride he goes on, so I'm more involved with the ride.
Okay.
Silver Surfer was like that too. It just like you felt like you're going along for the ride. So that it's as far as fun goes, complicated. Actually, one is probably who I'm drawing right now. I'm doing a Spider-Man annual.
Okay.
And as much as I love Spider-Man, all those little webs, you got you got to count them, it's 3 across here, and because it's all got to be in the same proportions and everything. And
Does he have the underarm webs?
No.
Okay. I was like, that adds a whole nother level.
yeah, but actually, I have drawn him with those, and I love those. And it's fun because you can be more spontaneous with those. But specifically, like on his torso. Like when this is really getting in the weeds here, but on his belt, you just have kind of a line in between the two lines of the belt, and then
Right.
you just weave the webs through there. But some artists you'll see when it comes up across the abdomen and then into the chest, you'll see there'll be more lines or less lines depending on the artist. But the point is, once you decide I'm going to do 5 across, you got to stick with 5 across.
Yeah.
So over and over, panel after panel, you're counting. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's where it would, and it's kind of a petty thing to discuss, but that would be complicated for me. Where rather than you're just I'm drawing, it's okay, you're counting, and it's the same with any character. If there's belt loops or whatever,
Right.
you're constantly, how many things in the boot are there?
He ripped
How long are the
Warlock's belt
shoelaces?
off.
Oh, wow. Got tired of that one. They were like, nope.
Right at the second
Suddenly
page.
he lost his belt.
First page.
Oh, first page gone.
Yeah,
Clever.
had King take his belt and was like, okay, don't have to draw those.
That was a veteran move right there.
Yeah, I was happy that nobody complained. And then I wanted a lightning bolt on Warlock, and it was like, cool, go for it. I asked, is this okay? And they were like, yeah. And I just had this blast
Awesome.
pop it on his chest, and yeah. So anyway, that's the
Warlock was fun. I liked him.
rigmarole of designing comics and
Okay. Fantastic. So thank you both so much. And for social media, where is the best place to follow you, your work?
Allred MD at Allred MD is my Twitter handle. That's what I check the most.
Okay.
Because there's specific people asking questions and whatnot, so that's where I'd be more likely to do that.
Okay.
I probably check Facebook once or twice a week, so not so much there. Twitter a couple times a day, and Instagram at AllredMD on Instagram, I think is my handle there. It is? Okay.
Excellent.
My best buddy Brian just
Right.
gave me a nod over there.
So Mike and Laura Allred for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcoming back to the show for the second time, the man, the myth, the voice, Mr. Phil LaMarr.
Thanks, John. How are you?
Things are going great.
Cool.
So it is day 3. You have one
right.
more, you have one more day.
Lost track.
You just get caught in this time loop.
Well, also, Emerald City Comic Con has gotten so big.
Yeah.
Like, you lose track of time, you lose track of space. Like, which building am I in and which floor am I on? Yeah.
Well, and it kind of trips you out because you will walk through sky bridges and everything. You will go
Right.
into a different building completely and then look up and be like, wait, we're still at the con?
Yeah.
Like, where we are meeting right now is across the street, not connected. And then you look around and you're like, no, this is still Emerald City Comic Con.
Yep.
There are booths, there are people. Like,
It's crazy.
it is massive.
Seriously.
So with your panel that you did on Friday,
Mm-hmm.
the spotlight on Phil LaMarr, the one where, it was just you up there and all of us were just fawning, that one. A couple things I wanted to talk about that got brought up during that panel.
All right.
So you talked about the audiobook industry.
Right.
Because people, of course, they know you, they know your voice, because anybody who has been listening to animation for the past 20 years, actually even longer than that, shout out to Mr. T cartoon.
Nobody's watching that.
I always got to put that plug in there, for a long time. People know your voice, and so they, of course, want to ask, audiobooks and this and that.
Right.
And you talked about it in an interesting way, and you were like, sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
But the structure is completely different than regular voice acting. Is there anything that maybe would bring you in to that world?
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, I really enjoy reading. I enjoy listening to people do good audiobook work, and I appreciate it for the skill that it is. I'm trying to think. I mean, and again, I don't know very much about it. I've never done it. All I know is, secondhand information that I know from people who, been in that world. And from what I understand, there can be lucrative, contracts if you're the guy who reads Harry Potter. You probably getting paid,
right? Well, like Stephen Fry did the UK versions,
right?
They had a different person who did the US versions,
right? So somebody is spending money, which means those people know they're making money,
right?
But I think for a lot of the realm, and I'd be interested to know, like, what that industry actually generates, because generally speaking, as a actor who, a cog in a machine of that type, what you get is some fraction of what is generated.
Right.
Of course, then the questions of fairness get into, well, how small a fraction, but honestly, they're just, you can't do everything.
Right.
And so you have to make decisions about what's worthwhile, and occasionally you can carve out a little time to do something experimental or just know somebody that's, do a favor for a friend, like this summer, I took a week and worked on what is basically a YouTube video.
Okay.
But it was a YouTube video by the sisters who do Hillywood. They have this amazing channel on YouTube, and they've been doing it for like 10 years, and the level of quality is astounding. Like what these two, like seemingly like little girls have been able to, create over the years was great. And, they called and said, would you want to be part of this? I'm like, I didn't know them personally.
Right.
I just had seen their work and met them, and I was like, you know what? If you can do that, then this is worth my time. I mean, it's not something I could do for a living, right? Because I can't feed my family,
of course,
like that. And unfortunately, there are certain things like the audiobook stuff that we're talking about that. In order to do it, you have to do it. You have to commit to it. It's not things that you can really dabble in.
Not so much. Well, like the 2 books that you talked about specifically that you carry with you, either in a
Right.
physical sense or in a metaphorical sense.
Yeah.
The Phantom Tollbooth and Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
Outside of those two books, is there any kind of book that you care enough and care deeply enough to kind of take that experiment? You know, if you were to really think about that and be like, all right, let me take a week, you know, and
Right.
try and put out some creation like that. Outside of those two books, is there another book that you think you might want to do?
And this is going to sound, I don't know, cynical or whatever, but this is my job.
Yeah.
And because of that, unfortunately, it can't just be about the love.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other, you know, aspects that have to be factored in. I mean, and those sort of choices happen everywhere you go. I mean, I've been invited to conventions in Australia where I would love to
That sounds
experience
great,
that.
yeah.
I would love to see that. But the way it's structured is it's a 2-week trip.
Oof.
And, you know, I'm like, I can't be gone from work, from my family for 2 weeks just because it would be cool.
Right.
You know, there are those other elements like, okay, in order for this to be worth it, in all senses, you
Absolutely.
know, the pros overweighing the cons. I mean, and that's not to say that there isn't some situation where, you know, if I had a chance to do a reading of Alice in Wonderland that was being distributed by someone reputable, but they didn't have, you know, it's like that might be the case. Like, oh, well,
Sure.
they don't have a ton of money, but there's enough to take the time to do it. Plus, they have, you know, technical people that can help me do it.
Right.
And it will be done at a level of quality that, you know, matches my love.
Speaking of things matching your love, I wanted to say congratulations. From the last time we talked a couple months ago
Right.
to today, Goblins Animated is officially happening.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's so amazing. I mean, the amount of support, the amount of love, you know, the people came out. I mean, I knew that Goblins, the webcomic, had, you know, an incredible, dedicated fan base.
Right.
You know, that was part of the reason that we went forward with this because of those fans. It's like, well, we don't want to just take this, hand it to some studio, and then have them force us to turn it into something, you know, that betrays these people's investment. You know, we want to do everything we can to try to bring the goblins that they know and love into the animated world. And we think the best way to do that is to, you know, what we did. We crowdfunded the money, and now we're going to be able to make a trailer that shows powers that be this specific world, these amazing characters, you know, the colors. This
Yeah.
is what we're talking about, you know, which to me, that's always a much better position to be in. Like coming in with, hey, here's a thing we have that we've created. Do you want to invest in this and help take it to the next level?
Right.
As opposed to, hi, I have an idea. Will you please
Pay me
give
for my- give me for
give
my
me money
idea."
to, you know, let me sell it to you. You know, this I think puts us in a greater position of strength, but it also requires us to do a lot more work on our own. And
Yeah.
you know, thankfully to, you know, thanks to all the, you know, the donators and backers and people who, you know, invested in us, we now get to do that.
And you said that you called in so many favors to
Yeah.
make this happen. And as I followed your journey from when you were first kind of announcing it a couple months ago, every time you would post a new Facebook video or Instagram, I was like, so this person and this person and this person.
Yeah.
How, I mean, talk about that a little bit. Like that, was it humbling? Did the excitement and humbleness ever quite match up?
Well, it's funny because we actually had, you know, an amazing lineup of people set up before we began.
Okay.
You know, we had Billy West, Maurice LaMarche, Matthew Mercer, Steve Bloom, Jennifer Hale.
Again,
Who am I
anybody,
forgetting?
for the people listening, any animation, voiceover work for the past 20 years,
Right.
almost everybody involved.
Right. Well, and then we added, you know, Tara Strong, Deborah Wilson, Ralph Garman, Chloe Dykstra, D. Bradley Baker,
Right.
You know, and even Dan Castellaneta agreed to do a small part for us. You know,
Sheesh.
and some of those we had in place before the crowdfunding, and we were just like, okay, let's hold back on this.
Of course.
You know, it's just because that's, I guess, how the crowdfunding thing works. You got to keep the momentum going. But some people came on as we were going, and that was really amazing to have friends, you know, put that kind of faith in you. And that sort of gave me certainly some of the energy required to keep going, because it's work, you know.
Yeah.
And it's not the kind of work that I like doing. I like working hard. I like coming up with the voices. I like creating things. I don't like asking people for money.
Right.
But in order to create things, and in this world, you either sell your IP to a massive corporation, or you go out and ask people for money.
Yeah. And let them help you create and help you bring that vision to life.
Yeah.
I mean, and watching that process it was just incredible. I mean, it was, I could see how excited you were. And at the back end, I know just how much work that must have taken and will continue to take. Like you said, it is a process.
Well, and also animation is very, very much a process.
Right.
And people's like, yay, you got the money to do a cartoon. It's like, that's basically instantly committing to at least 9 to 12 months of work, because it only goes so fast.
Yeah.
You know,
you joked about that during the panel when someone was like, you know, when people come up and they're like, hey, I heard you're doing this thing. In your head, the voiceover work was done 12 months ago.
Exactly.
So the fact that trailers are coming out or that things are coming out now, people are like, oh my gosh, he's in this. And you're like,
what was that again?
2016.
Right.
So when you think of projects, I mean, now that you've been in the industry and such a luminary in the industry for so long, when you get a new project, is that immediately kind of in your head when you're like, okay, let me create this character, let me create this voice, knowing that you might not see what it will look like for a while?
Not well. I mean, the thing you have to understand is most things that are created fail.
Yeah.
Just statistically speaking, most things are not hits. Most things are not things that people remember from their childhoods. Most things aren't. So the majority of the jobs I do, you're not going to ask me about in 20 years.
Interesting.
You know? And of course, that doesn't mean I put any less into them.
Of course. Yeah.
You know? But it also means that you can only invest so much in each of them. You know? You give every job your all, and then you let it go. Because in some ways, it's sort of an assembly line in that I'm responsible for my part of building this thing. And that's all I can be responsible for. You know, I can't go, well, now when you guys do the animatic, make sure you... It's not my job. You know?
When did you learn how to kind of let go? And talk about that. I mean, because that had to be another just learning process where, you know, things like Mad TV and sketch comedy, you are involved the whole time. You know, and you can be involved in either, you know, you were talking to the writer, being like, okay, can we do this and this?
Right.
The process that you just described of you do X and then you just leave it.
Right.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, I mean, generally speaking, that is the case in pretty much all of show business, unless you are a director or a producer.
Right.
You know, somebody who's got their hand in it all the way. But even, you know, like for stage directors, the minute the show opens, they got to let go.
Yeah.
A director is not allowed to give any notes after opening. You know, so there's always some sort of part of the process that's letting go. I mean, for feature film, you know, they spend years or months writing a script before they even do any casting. You know, actors come in just for that section, from casting through the end of production. And then there's months and months of post-production, especially nowadays. If there's a bunch of CG, there could be years.
Oh, sheesh. Yeah.
You know, and you got to commit fully to your part of the process, because it is a collaboration. You know, everybody is counting on everybody else to do their part. and to do everything they can to make their part good. You know, I'm not going to go hang lights. That's not my job. That's not what I do. But I'm praying that the guys who do know what they're doing. Because if I ain't lit, all the acting I could do in the world won't matter because no one will see it.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Right? You know, so, I mean, I think it's something that I've learned over the years. Just, I think at the very beginning, you know, when you get your first job, it's everything. Oh my God, I've got a job. You obsess about it for, you know, weeks or days before you go on set, and then you're super nervous, you know, and you know, then you do your job, and then after it's over, you're, how did I do? Did everyone like me? What's going to happen to it? You know, but hopefully, you get more than one job.
Yes, true.
So you have something else to think about, and then you move on, and you realize, like, oh, all that thinking I was doing, other than my part of the process, didn't change or affect anything. You know, I did a movie years ago. I wasn't doing a lot of feature films. I think it was after Mad TV.
Okay.
And I got a part relatively.
It was not that little independent feature Pulp Fiction. It was not.
No.
Okay.
That was before. No, this one the prospects of this looked much bigger than the prospects for Pulp Fiction before we did it.
Wow.
Because this was a feature film, really funny script, starring Bill Murray, Catherine O'Hara, James Spader, Laura Flynn Boyle, Jay Moore, you know,
right?
All of these amazing people. And it was gonna go to Calgary to shoot for, you know, 2-3 weeks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, I'd done some Roger Corman horror movies. I'd done a bunch of stuff that never saw the light of day. I'm like, well, this movie, I don't have a big part, but it's Bill Murray movie. You know, this could be the next Ghostbusters. Never released.
Wow.
Disappeared. I mean, like I described that movie to you. I said, all those people, you have no idea what I'm talking about.
I was seriously, as he is saying the names, I'm looking up in my window, you know, of my mind being like, okay, this person, trying to think of the time, maybe 1995, what happened?
Right. No, you're thinking, I must have seen this movie or heard of this movie. You haven't. It was never released in theaters. It was never advertised anywhere. You know,
wow.
It just, because of elements completely outside of all of our control.
Right.
You know, whatever great work we did, no one ever saw.
Wow. I think one of the other kind of gems, and you just kind of touched on it briefly also, is before you become a voice actor, and everybody wants to ask you, of course, like, how do I become a voice actor? You have to know how to act.
Yep.
And you talked about that in such a way because, again, people hear it and people watch so much animation these days, being like, that sounds like an amazing career, an amazing job, which I'm sure it is.
It is.
But without understanding that baseline, and you said it in a perfect way, acting.
Yeah.
Like, even though voice comes before it, it is voice acting. You have to know the basics of how to act, or that performance is going to suffer.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it won't be a performance. You have to know how to take a script, invest it with life, and make that imaginary circumstance real for the audience. That's the job of an actor, period. No matter whether you are doing it on a preschool kids show, whether it's Dora the Explorer, whether it's, Bette Midler and Hello Dolly on Broadway, whether it's The Black Panther. As an actor, your job is to take that script and bring it to life for the audience, no matter what. The only difference is, technically speaking, how you do your performance. Do you do it into a camera? Do you do it to a live group? Do you do it to a microphone? Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like a lot of people look at voice acting as sort of a poor cousin to quote unquote real acting. I've had people say,
acting.
Like, do you miss real acting?
Oh, come on.
Or just like, I could do voice acting. I mean, I ain't that cute. Like, so I couldn't do, be on TV, but I talk all the time. Why shouldn't I get paid for it? It's like, no,
not quite the same.
It's not the thing. It's not the easier kind of acting.
Right.
And in fact, reading words off a page without sounding like you're reading is actually a lot harder than many people think.
Absolutely.
So, and also, it's a very unique field in the sense that everybody I know who's in it came at it from a different way.
Yeah.
You know, you hear a lot of people think about going to Hollywood to be a movie actor. They think of a path. You know, it's like, well, you know, I did plays in high school and I was, you know, considered really good looking. So I got on a bus and went to Hollywood and got off and got an agent and did it. And there is something of a prescribed path.
Sure.
You know,
well, you have to become a waiter first,
right,
and drop off your screenplay to a bunch of people that come in the restaurant.
Exactly. Right. There are at least ideas of how to do it. The truth is, with voice acting, there isn't.
Yeah.
There is no prescribed path because literally everybody's path is different. You know? And that's why it's really hard when someone comes up. It's like, how do I get into voice acting? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know you. Right. I can tell you how I got into voice acting and how the people I know got into voice acting. You're going to have to figure out how you will get into voice acting. But that said, there is also, I think, a value in knowing how other people did it.
Absolutely.
You know, like Rob Paulson's Talkin' Tunes podcast is an invaluable resource for that way. You know,
his podcast, it blows my mind. I mean, the people that he brings on there, and you know, people listening who, you know, kind of want a little bit of a format. I mean, the luminaries in voice acting and doing iconic voices from movies or TV shows.
Right.
I mean, it is tremendous. And that was actually in a documentary that I watched about voice acting.
Which one?
I'm trying to remember the name of it.
It wasn't I Know That Voice, was it?
Yes.
I think
so.
And produced by my castmate from Futurama, John DiMaggio.
Right. And so I forget which voice actor was talking about it, but they were saying that doing a voice is great. If you do a great Porky Pig, if you do a great Mel Blanc anything,
right.
But to take that character and recite Shakespeare, that is when you know you have a voice.
Right.
Because then, other than that, you were just imitating as opposed to creating.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with Talkin' Tunes, I mean, the stuff that he does on there, you have done stuff like that. I mean, it's just like to take that voice and not just imitate, but do something else, even though you were terrified to do any of the Looney Tunes ones when they were recasting for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
A little bit intimidating.
That was just my hang up.
When you get a CD of all Mel Blanc doing all of them, how are you going to, no.
No, but, I mean, Billy was Bugs Bunny. Billy West was Bugs Bunny. I mean, that's the thing is that people can do it because Mel was just a guy, just like we're all just people. Mm-hmm. You know, it can be done. But yeah, there's also, you can't ignore just the emotional weight that these characters carry.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's the thing. Like, for me to try to be Bugs Bunny just on a personal level, it was just not doable.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough.
Right.
To kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
So what always blows me away is in all of the projects that you have been involved in, which we could not even list, you still remember lines. You still remember, like during the panel, you were able to just drop out quotes and drop out lines and the song from Futurama that Hermes sang.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I can do that with a good handful. Mm-hmm. I can't do that with all of them.
And that kind of leads into my question of what are the things that really do make it stick into your head? Is it the character? Is it the certain voice? Because as you said, you talk about you have to get to know your voice and where that voice lives, both in your body, in your heart, in your throat. So when you think about those lines, kind of which ones, how do they stick out?
I mean, that in particular generally comes from the quality of the writing, which I'd say is true of any acting you do. Like, the lines you remember are the ones that are great. You know? I mean, there have been a lot of shows I worked on that weren't necessarily fantastically written, and there's certainly, I think for me, the significance of a project is multi-layered. It's the work I did and how I felt about it. There's the people I worked with.
Yeah.
Like when you work with Matt Groening, it kind of sticks in your mind.
A little bit, yeah.
You work with Seth MacFarlane. And I've been lucky enough to work with some really amazing creators. Dave Filoni on Clone Wars, Gendy Tartakovsky on Samurai Jack. These are people who make work that sticks. With you as a performer, with you as a viewer, whatever. Their work is strong. It's powerful. and those tend to stick. The Justice League stuff, the
Incredible.
the Bruce Timm designs, the Dwayne
Little
McDuffie,
itty bitty legs, big chests,
Right.
big bodies.
Yeah, I mean that stuff can't help but stick with you. I mean, there's stuff that's not that well regarded and well known. Like the work we did with Greg Weisman on Spectacular Spider-Man. I loved that stuff.
Right.
And it's also who you're working with.
Of course.
It's a great cast. There was a show we did years and years and years ago. One of the first shows I was a regular on called Weekenders.
Okay.
I don't actually remember any lines from that, but I certainly remember those characters and the relationships and the actors. I worked on that with Jason Marsden, Gray Delisle, and Kath Soucie. It was the four of us as these four little kids. And that show was not a hit. That show was not a cult favorite, but it was significant to me because it was one of my very first, and because of those people. Those three actors plus Doug Langdale, the creator, they were all really amazingly talented people that I learned stuff from, and that experience sticks with me because of that.
Incredible. I mean, it all comes down to the writing.
Yeah.
To the process.
Yeah.
Not the hero or the villain, which is another question you get asked all the time. Which is more fun? The writing.
Yeah. It's
Excellent.
the stuff that's well done. Yeah.
So other than Goblins Animated, which is you're working your butt off, still working your butt off.
Right.
To get, out the rewards for the Kickstarter or the crowdfunding backers.
Right.
And other than that, kind of what are some other projects that you can talk about? Because again, you always have 50 other projects that you cannot talk about.
I know that's that, and of course, those are the ones that stick in your mind. The minute someone says, "What are you working on?" I'm like, make sure I don't say that. Make sure you don't say that.
Right. And of course, the first thing that comes to your mind.
Right. And now I can't think of anything else except the ones I can't mention. What have we been working on? And also, there's so many these days. Everybody's so secretive about everything, and it gets to the point where you're not sure.
Yeah.
Like there's things I'm like, oh, I can't really talk about that. It's like, oh, it came out 2 months ago. I'm like, oh, really?
It's like, it was great.
Shadow of War is out, right? Okay, yes, I'm in that.
Right.
And honestly, it usually comes back to when I get fan response.
Right.
That's when I know what's hitting, what's significant. God, what have we been working on? Been working on Craig of the Creek, which is a new Cartoon Network show. Which is really fun. What else? I think that's the only regular gig going on right now. And that's actually just because it's been going on long enough that I can say, oh, it's actually out. Yeah.
Excellent. One thing that I loved seeing, you were recording somewhere, you put on Instagram. I assume some voiceover work needed to get done right away.
Right.
And you made a makeshift studio with a chair and a towel.
Yes, in the hotel closet.
That type of ingenuity, that was just fun to see because I was like, I cover film festivals and things all over. We duck into corners.
Right.
We do all of this. To see you, the professional and everything, just be like, nope, this was my studio for the day.
Right. Because sometimes, basically it's either you figure out a way to do it or somebody else gets the job.
Yep.
And that's I'm still hungry enough to work hard.
And I know you don't like the term legend because legend means hey, I still need to work, guys.
Right.
Once legend gets put in front of your name, then people are like, oh, we'll give this to some young upstart. No, man, Phil LaMarr needs work.
Exactly.
Exactly. Excellent. And then social media, where can people also, in particular, Goblins Animated, where can people go to get updates on that? And where can they find you?
The main portal for Goblins is goblinsanimated.org.
Excellent.
But you can also find us on Instagram at Goblins Animated, and I'll always have some updates on my personal stuff at Phil LaMarr on Twitter and the phillamar.com, my website.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you again so much for being on the show for a second time.
Sure.
It is always a pleasure. I'm always enamored because, again, you are my childhood, you are my adolescence, you are my adulthood. So thank you so much, Phil LaMarr.
Thank you, John.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get our ourselves a treat.